Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. David Glassner, Superintendent of the Shaker Heights City School District, and welcome to this evening. We're going to be doing a presentation around the state of our schools. This presentation will also include a conversation and discussion with Dr. Nicole Patterson, our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Learning Specialist, and we will have the opportunity for participants, for folks who are watching, to ask questions or share comments with us. Just some logistics before we get started. I'm going to go over some slides, share some information with everyone. After that, Dr. Patterson is going to join me, share some of her thoughts and reflections, and then we will open up this webinar for questions and comments. So you will be able to see a chat button appearing on your screens a little bit later in this presentation. And at that point, you'll be able to share questions and comments with us. We can see your questions and comments. Other attendees will not be able to see those questions and comments, and we will do our best to answer those questions and comments that come in. With that, I'm going to get started and really thank you everyone for joining again this evening. This just shows kind of our order for this evening. I'm going to be talking about our key performance indicators for this academic year, talk about some of the successes that we've experienced, and then I'm going to go through each of our strategic plan goal areas and talk about some of the highlights in each of those areas as well as some of the next steps. And you'll see a list of those goal areas on the slide in front of you. They include areas like strengthening student learning and advancing educational equity. I'm very excited to share both the highlights and the work that we're continuing in each of those areas. One more note before I go on, you will see these slides in front of you. I will do my best to not read the slide line by line. I know you can do that now or on your own time. I will try to share some of the highlights on the slides as well as some of my own experiences with you related to the information on the slides. I should also note that this presentation is being recorded and we will share it after our discussion this evening. So on this slide, and before we jump into our strategic plan goal areas, I did want to highlight that for this year, we started this year by identifying some key performance indicator areas that are really focus areas for our work this year. You'll see, for example, key performance indicator area 1 revolves around early literacy. And we have data points that we associate with each of these key performance indicator areas. So for example, when we're talking about early literacy, we're really looking to see the number and percentage of students in early grades, so up until grade 3, that are predicted to be on track or who demonstrate being on track for proficiency at the 3rd grade reading level, or what is called in Ohio the 3rd grade reading guarantee. So we have some key data points that are associated with each of these key performance indicator areas. Some of those data points are quantitative and are related to state assessment measures or assessment measures in our district. Some of them have to do with school culture and climate and data that we collect through our Panorama survey. We also publish an annual report every year related to our strategic plan. We highlight ways that we've made progress on strategic plan goals and objectives. We also highlight narratives and stories related to the work that we're doing that connects with our strategic plan. You'll see the QR code that's in front of you on the slide. If you follow that QR code, you will get a copy of our strategic plan annual report, which includes a wealth of data related to the work that we're doing. I encourage you to read through that when you are able to, if you haven't done so already. Our theme this year is Shaker Rising, Excellence is Inclusive. And you're going to hear me talking about that theme throughout the presentation this evening. I really want to highlight that our goal in broad strokes this year is to continue to maintain, support, and expand our history and our tradition of academic excellence, of rigor, of challenging students, while also making sure that we are creating inclusive learning environments, spaces where our community can come together, spaces where our students, our staff, and our families can experience diversity and equity. And again, you'll see me highlighting that throughout this presentation, but it really has been a key part of our work this year. Some of our successes, we are seeing that we're continuing to rebound from the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our academic achievement metrics and levels continue to climb back to pre-pandemic levels, which is great. We're also seeing a much more positive school culture and climate, really across grade levels, both as measured in terms of disciplinary incidents, but also just the way students are experiencing school and telling us about how they're experiencing school. We've had a great range of students who have participated in excellent programs and pathways. You'll see on this slide that the number of Black students in our IB diploma program and in our AP courses has continued to rise since 2020, 2021, which is fantastic. We want all of our course pathways to be reflective of our demographic composition as a community. And of course, as always, our students are participating in and engaging in a wide range of enrichment and enriching opportunities. As we sit here this evening, for example, I know our high school band just arrived in France. I think they've arrived at this point, and they're going to be playing concerts throughout Paris and in other cities around France. That is one of many, many fantastic experiences that our students get to have this year. I know we had our night for the red and white just last weekend, and we got to see our orchestra perform and our choir perform, and students from SpongeBob the Musical perform. We've seen our athletic teams be successful on the court and on the field, as well as off the court and off the field. So those are just some fantastic highlights of our year so far. So now I'm going to go into each of the goal areas in our strategic plan. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to highlight some of the successes we've had related to each of those goal areas, as well as talk a little bit about some of the next steps and the action steps that we're implementing to continue to advance and further the work in each of the goal areas. Goal number one really has to do with strengthening student learning. It's about the academic experiences that students have. And you'll see here in this goal that we're really aiming to ensure that each student has a rigorous and enriching educational experience. That aligns with the International Baccalaureate Philosophy and Framework. Here in Shaker Heights, our work rests on two pillars. We know that we are an international baccalaureate district. We want to make sure that all of the work that we do aligns with International Baccalaureate Framework and Philosophy. And we want to advance equity while doing that. So International Baccalaureate, the IB program, and equity are the two pillars that really help support a lot of our work. In this goal area, just some of the highlights of this year, we have had IB community projects, that's for 8th grade students, have been amazing this year. I know I had the opportunity to go see our 8th grade IB community project showcase just a couple of weeks ago. The community project is an opportunity for our 8th grade students to work in teams to explore an area that they're passionate about, that is something that will help make our community better or strengthen our community. They do research, they take action to help support the community. And it was really fantastic to hear and see our 8th grade students take leadership in such a wide range of opportunities and areas in our community, locally, regionally, and nationally. We also have our students engaging in design cycle experiences. The design cycle is really a problem-solving model where students identify real-world problems, they research solutions, they work together in teams to implement those solutions, and then they reflect on the successes of those solutions. At our elementary level, every student now in each unit of inquiry has the opportunity to participate and engage in those kinds of learning experiences. And we know that those are really important. As you can see from what I'm sharing, we really have been embedding the IB philosophy and framework across all of our grade levels. And we were excited that earlier this year we had a successful IB evaluation for all of our schools. The IB evaluation process is a process that includes both a pretty intensive self study or self reflection component where we look at our own practices, assess what's going well, assess areas that we need to improve in. And we have outside evaluators come and look at our schools, come and look at the work that we're doing, talk to a wide range of stakeholders. It was really validating to hear a lot of the positive feedback they shared, as well as the areas that we need to continue to grow in. I want to also highlight that we've spent a lot of time and effort this year focusing on our career and technical education programming and expansion. We now have career and technical education course offerings here in Shaker Heights. Our students can take machining and advanced robotics classes. Those courses are open to Shaker Heights students as well as other students in our career technical education consortium. It's exciting to see our students engaged in course pathways and experiences where they have the opportunity to be prepared for college pathways, career pathways, and to help continue to get experiences that will prepare them for the world beyond 12th grade. So, those are some of the highlights in this goal area. We also know that we have next steps and work to do in this area. We have spent a lot of time over the past couple of years focusing on mathematics instruction, curriculum, and what the classroom looks like. We've done some work around language arts, and we know that that's an area that we need to invest more time, energy, and effort to strengthen and continue to build on our language arts offerings and instruction. I mentioned career technical education course pathways. That's also an area where we want to keep refining what we're offering and also hopefully add course pathways for students. We also want to make sure that we are creating curriculum and implementing curriculum that has opportunities for students to engage at different entry points, that engages students at different levels who are at different interest points. So, depending on what they are passionate about, what they're interested in pursuing, while also meeting rigorous state standards. A model of this work has been our Innovative Center for Personalized Learning, where we've really created opportunities for students to engage in both passion projects and areas that they're really interested in, where they're looking at opportunities to engage in our community at large while also meeting state standards. And we're looking forward to continuing to expand that kind of work in our traditional learning centers sites as well. Lastly, I just want to highlight, I know this is something we've talked a lot about over the past couple of months, but we are excited to be able to expand our pre-K program because we know that early childhood presents an incredible opportunity to make sure our students are coming to kindergarten already with a strong foundation in early literacy, in skills that help students socialize with each other and interact with each other. And so we're excited about the opportunity to continue to expand our pre-K program as part of our overall long-term facilities plan, which I'll be talking about again in a few minutes. So we're going to move on to goal 2 in our strategic plan. Goal 2 really revolves around advancing educational equity. And as I mentioned before, the 2 pillars of our work, the International Baccalaureate Framework and Philosophy, and equity. And goal 2 really focuses on the work that we can and must do in this area. Goal 2 aims to advance educational equity by disrupting and removing institutional structures and practices which have historically been associated with racism, oppression, and other forms of marginalization. And I am excited to share with you that we have had a lot of highlights and successes in this area this year. And these highlights and successes are also very challenging. We are working to advance and move past structural and systemic issues that relate to oppression, marginalization, and racism. And I think in Shaker Heights, we are fortunate that we have a community invested in this work, that we have a community that believes in this work and that we have a community who is willing to support this work, even in the face of those challenges. There are some highlights. I'll just name a few here. We've talked a lot about this over the past couple of years, but we are becoming a leader across the country related to our efforts around detracking. And our goal, and I want to make sure this is very clear, our goal is to ensure that all students have access to a rigorous and challenging and supportive curriculum and instruction in the classroom. Just to be clear, we are making sure that all students have that opportunity. I will give an example. In mathematics, we now have put into place a structure where all eighth grade students are taking algebra in eighth grade. That didn't used to be the case. Used to be that only some students took algebra in eighth grade. And we know how important algebra is for course pathways and other career and life opportunities beyond the eighth grade. And so we're excited by the work that we're doing as it relates to making sure that all students have access to that kind of rigorous, challenging, and supportive curriculum. We have also implemented a review tool. Sorry, if you could go back a minute. We have also implemented a review tool to ensure that our curriculum is inclusive of our students, that it provides opportunities for our students to see themselves. You'll see on this slide, it's called the Equity Curriculum Review Tool. Our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, as well as our instructional leaders at the building level, have done a great job of looking at our curriculum through this lens. You'll see one of our next steps is that we want to expand the use of those kinds of tools for our older grade levels as well. I've mentioned our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We'll be talking about that quite a bit this evening. Dr. Patterson is part of that office. And it's really exciting that here in Shaker Heights, we are dedicating resources and investing in the supports that we need as a district to ensure that we're advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion across our community. We've highlighted some of these other elements before. The last thing I'll mention on this slide is just our efforts around the recruitment and retention of a diverse staff. We know it's important for our students to both see themselves in our staff and faculty and also see others in our staff and faculty. And that's good for all students. And we are being much more intentional around our efforts to ensure that when we recruit and hire staff, that we're keeping that in mind, and also that we are retaining staff that represent a wide range of diversity for our students. There are some areas that we are continuing to work on in this goal area. I know I already mentioned that equity review tool. We want to implement that at the secondary level as well and make sure that that is a lens that we are looking at when we assess and evaluate our curriculum and our curriculum resources. We also know that the work that we're doing in this goal area is hard, it is challenging, it is new. We are reimagining and re-envisioning what learning classrooms and experiences look like, and that requires a lot of support. And so we are expanding and refining professional learning, specifically around detracking, but also in a wide range of other areas, to make sure that our faculty and our staff have the support that they need to be successful with students in the classroom. We've spent a lot of time communicating these changes specifically around detracking, and I also realize that because this is new and different and something that may be a different experience that a lot of our students or families haven't had, that we need to continue to do more in the way of communicating with staff and families what this looks like, where are the areas we're being successful in, what data are we monitoring to ensure that we're measuring success and progress, and what are the areas that we need to continue to improve in. This State of the Schools discussion and presentation is one of the ways that we're continuing to communicate with staff and families, but certainly not the only way. So goal 3 really has to do with the work that we're doing around strengthening the supports for student learning. So really, in a lot of ways, goal 3 has to do with a lot of the things that happen behind the scenes to help support student learning and teaching. We want to make sure that we are providing support as it relates to business and operations, human resources, finance and facilities, to really help promote and advance our district goals and objectives. So I want to share just a few highlights in this area and again, some next steps. So probably not a surprise to many of you listening today, but one of the main highlights in this area is the work that we have done together to create a long-term facilities plan. This is work that we have been doing in this community probably for nearly a decade. It is challenging work with challenging decisions that we have to make, and we know how important it is for our facilities to provide the kind of settings to help support student learning and teaching, particularly in ways that help prepare our students to enter the workforce and college and career pathways when they leave Shaker Heights. So you'll be hearing more about that. I know you've probably heard a lot about the decisions that we are moving towards making, but we are excited by the progress that we've made in this area. Behind the scenes, we've also done a lot of work related to human resources and our finance platforms. Again, a lot of that is happening behind the scenes, but we've been able to adopt and implement some new software platforms and some other structures that have really made a more seamless structure happen so that we can really focus on student learning and teaching. So those are some of the highlights. Just some of the next steps in this area. We are, of course, continuing to work to finalize decisions related to long-term facilities planning. For example, we're going to continue to work around creating specific timelines related to renovation and construction, also related to expanding our pre-K program. Those are some of the things that we'll be talking about over the next couple of months as we move ahead with the long-term facilities plan. We also are in the process of looking for a new treasurer. Unfortunately, our longtime district treasurer, Mr. Brian Chrisman, is retiring at the end of this academic year. And so we're looking for a new treasurer. And this is a very big decision for our district. And we're looking forward to what that process will involve. Of course, it will include a wide range of input and stakeholder input and feedback, and that process is ongoing. The next goal area is goal 4. Goal 4 really has to really do with implementing high quality professional learning for our faculty and staff. And as I've mentioned before, we know how critical professional learning is, especially given the work that we're doing here in Shaker Heights. So I'd like to share just some highlights as well as some next steps in this area. First of all, I just want to commend our community at large, as well as our professional learning leaders, our instructional team leaders, our IB coordinators, our instructional coaches, our Department of Learning and Teaching, our administrators, and our teachers for all the amazing work that they are doing around professional learning. We have done a lot of work around professional learning, specifically related to detracking. Opportunities for our whole staff to engage in that professional learning, as well as opportunities for more individualized and targeted supports, whether that's by subject area, by grade level, or just individual. I know when Dr. Patterson is here, we'll be talking through some of those experiences. We've had the opportunity this year to get into schools through a lens of equity. We call those equity rounds, where we work with adults in the building, teachers, administrators, and others to look at learning and classroom spaces through a lens of equity. I'm excited to share that this year we have also included students in those equity rounds, and it is really impactful to hear and engage our student voices around these kinds of experiences. We've also continued to research and implement a wide range of professional learning programs, strategies, and interventions. In fact, this year, during our beginning of the year kickoff at our convocation for the entire district, we really took that as an opportunity, as also a professional learning opportunity, where we could engage our whole staff and faculty community around these issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really that idea of inclusive excellence across our school. There are some next steps and action steps that we're looking to continue to implement. We want to continue to build upon that professional learning work. We know this is work that we need to continue to do, and it may never end because we know how important it is to continue to help our staff feel comfortable and gain more expertise, teaching in settings that may be very different from the settings that we had a few years ago. We also want to continue to provide opportunities for non-teaching staff to engage in professional learning throughout the school year. So those are just some of the next steps in Goal 4. I'd now like to invite Dr. Patterson up to continue this conversation with me. Dr. Patterson, again, is our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, our DEI learning specialist. What we're going to do, I'm going to invite Dr. Patterson just to share some of her reflections and thoughts on the information that I just shared. And we will open up the webinar, I believe, momentarily for folks who want to start asking questions or provide comments. After Dr. Patterson shares some of her thoughts, we'll start responding to those questions and comments. Dr. Patterson, I just want to say how thrilled I am that you are here, and also really just highlight the work that you've done this year. I think we're one of very few districts where we have a person dedicated to looking at our learning experiences and supporting learning experiences through the lens of DEI. I know the work that you've done is incredibly important across our district. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I appreciate this opportunity to be able to talk with you and share some of the work that I've not only done by myself, but with other people as well. I really feel blessed to be in this situation, to be part of the Shaker experience. We have done so much as a district. And I think back to the goals you were speaking of, strengthening our student learning. The professional learning is where it starts for our children. We can't have an equitable place if the people that are teaching our children aren't looking through that lens as well. And so that's what we are doing here in Shaker. We're on that path. We're working on ourselves, and we're having professional learning that's really laser focused on what we can do as individuals. And I think that is one of the highlights in the work that I do. I have colleagues that do this with me, and we're really trying to engage each other in our own path on this journey of equity and how it's going to impact our students. And that is something I really want to highlight right now, is that our students are involved in this process as well. During equity rounds, as you mentioned, their voice was shared. They told about things that they experienced in classrooms, and we talked about them and figured out where can we grow as adult learners, as educators in this district to help support them. And in the past, students have been able to speak in other ways, but actually have an impact. This year was even deeper than last year. So I'm really proud that that equity rounds process is still happening. Something else that we're doing in Shaker that I wanted to bring to light is, you mentioned the inclusive excellence framework. As we move forward in our district, we're trying to look through that inclusivity lens, where it's not just race and culture, but we're looking at religion, we're looking at ethnicities, we're looking at all these different groups that make us Shaker, and how we can bring that into the classroom and bring that into our own frame of mind thinking. In the past, I think there were pockets of this happening, but now as a unit, we're moving forward through that lens, and we're being bold with that. We are naming race in these discussions. We're not tiptoeing around these discussions. We're naming it. Children are, and we're actually digging deep into some of the difficult waters that this brings about. And I'm really proud to say that teachers are going in, and they're going in these leaning in conversations that's challenging. It is a process, but we are moving forward step by step. Something else I wanted to highlight is a South African trip we just came back from. Shaker has a strategic plan that involves an equity policy that is about us giving access to different parts of the curriculum, access for students to have different experiences. And going to South Africa makes it apparent that Shaker is embracing this. Our hope is that we're able to take students and leaders, that we can experience what is happening in South Africa and bring back that culture into what we are doing here in Shaker, and help our students to learn about South African culture as well and as a whole. By doing that, we are truly implementing what we mean when we say equitable access to the curriculum. It's not just the curriculum that is handed to us, but it's about us going out and getting things and making connections for our students. And so I'm really excited that that is something that is happening here in Shaker. And I think one of the last things I wanted to bring up, you already mentioned our convocation at the beginning of the school year, but we also had a speaker come, Kurt Russell, our National Teacher of the Year. Hearing him speak and allowing our teachers to dialogue with him allowed educators to see that we can do this, that although it might be challenging, but we can see someone who has done the same type of work with their students, a high school teacher, and he took his experiences on how he can move forward in his own equity work and spread it throughout his building. And I feel like that's some of the things that we're doing here. Those are some of the pieces that I'm trying to put together. As I coach teachers, I'm working with departments as well. I'm working at grade level leaders in different situations. I'm really trying to push us forward so that we engage with each other and look at each other critically and think, what do I need to do to push the district forward? It's not enough to just add on different pieces, but we really need to step wholeheartedly into this space and say, I'm here, I'm going to try to do this. I might feel awkward, but I'm pushing through anyways. And we have support like myself and my ODI department to help see us through this journey. I'm really proud to be part of this. Shaker is doing a lot of great things, and there's things that we're going to continue to work on and grow. But I can say that we are facing it head on. We're not skirting different issues, we're facing them head on. I'm happy to be part of that process.
Thank you so much. We're going to open up the floor to questions. Just a couple quick comments before we do so. First of all, I hope when we get to talk through some of the questions, I know you get to experience a lot of our classrooms. I've been
Yes,
in classrooms quite a bit this year, talking with students and teachers. I imagine we're going to get to share some of those
yeah,
experiences because I know we have a lot of great things to talk about.
absolutely.
Also, before we go to questions, I just wanted to share just a couple things. I know this past week we've gotten a lot of questions specifically around our world language program, and also around some of our schedule planning for next year. So I just wanted to quickly address those before we go through some of the questions and comments that we've been getting online. First of all, in terms of world language, I know there have been some questions related specifically to Latin and Greek offerings. Just to be clear, we remain committed to having a wide range of world language offerings for our students. We know as an IB district that's critical. Um, and so, in terms of world language, we want to make sure that our students continue to have those opportunities. Latin specifically, we are going to be continuing to offer Latin in sixth grade next year. I know there's been some questions around that. Uh, we currently are not planning to have Latin be part of our language carousel in fifth grade. Now, our language carousel is new or relatively new. We do expect that students will still sign up for Latin. We know students have already signed up for Latin next year. We will continue to offer Latin at the middle school and high school as well. In terms of Greek, that's a high school course offering. Students currently do have the opportunity to sign up for Greek at the high school. Like all of our subject areas, we do need student enrollment to kind of reach a critical mass in order to be able to offer that course. As of today, it's a relatively small handful of students who've signed up for Greek, but of course, if that changes related to Latin in sixth grade or Greek at the high school, we will adjust accordingly. The other thing I just wanted to mention is just some of our schedule planning for next year. As you know, always this time of year, we are looking at our schedules. Sometimes that includes bell schedules in terms of start and end times. We're not looking at changing those for next year for any of our buildings. Um, but we are looking at other scheduling changes. We're looking at specifically some potential changes related to the elementary schedule that would provide more opportunities for professional learning for teachers, as well as students to engage in what we call single subject learning experiences like art, PE, music, Spanish, those kinds of single subjects. This is all still things we're working on. No decisions have been made. There are a lot of different variables that we have to consider, and we will be sure to share more information with our community when it becomes available. So that we're going to jump into some questions. The first question we have, and I want to take a moment just to thank our communications team for all of the work they're doing behind the scenes to help make this evening happen. The first question we have, are there advanced math classes still occurring at Woodbury? Yes, definitely. In fact, with detracking, our goal is to ensure that all students have access to those advanced classes, not just some students. In the past, when we had track courses, only a certain number of students would be in advanced classes, and other students would be in grade level classes. And what we found was that those classes were really largely segregated. And most of the white students were in those advanced tracks, and most of the black students were in those grade level tracks. And once you were in a track, you really never left that track. Really, and that had an impact all the way up until high school. I know I've had the opportunity this year to visit a lot of our math classes specifically, along with other classes, and talked with teachers. There are a lot of successes that we're experiencing. This has really forced us and required us to create classrooms that are very flexible, where students are working in small groups or individually. Some usually with multiple adults in the classroom, and students might be working with those adults in different settings.
And can I add a little
Yeah.
bit? I wanted to share that we have multiple adults, as you said, and we have people that are hitting those higher end thinking types of questions. So a lot of the critique is, well, what about my student? Are they going to get this quality, rigorous education in these different classes? Absolutely, they are. I have seen this. It's the way that we are scaffolding our work and our teaching, and the way that adults in the building are integrating their teaching styles with each other. So we're really supporting all students in different ways.
I had the opportunity, maybe about a month ago, I had lunch with a number of our middle school students, and we talked quite a bit about their math experiences. It was really interesting. From the student perspective, they did not bring up once uh, this idea, that there should be classes where, some students are in, or where some students belong and other students don't belong. They did talk a lot about the individualized support, instruction, and enrichment that they get. And they talked about where that has been successful and where we need to grow and strengthen that work. They talked a lot about their experiences working in groups made up of different students, and how they appreciate that. They talked about technology and ways that they use technology in ways that kind of challenge them, that is rigorous, that is robust. And they talked about sometimes one technology they felt like wasn't used in that way. I just thought it was really interesting because, from a student lens, I think our students really get it. That here is an opportunity to create classrooms that really reflect the real world, where our students are being challenged and where they're being supported. Um, and sometimes that's with one adult, sometimes it's with multiple adults, but it's really interesting to see. And in my experience going to visit math classrooms, I've really seen that being implemented. I want to really shout out and acknowledge the hard work of our teachers, our
Yes,
instructional
yeah.
support staff, that have made that happen.
And I think that's key, is that children are seeing the supports. I remember when I taught fourth grade, there was always this anxiety towards the end of the year is what course they were going to be in when they got to Woodbury.
Mm.
And so I think now they're seeing the differences. So absolutely.
I know we have a question that's related. What is your response that the core slash honors merger is more at the core level and not the honors level? So just a little bit of background. So I know I talked about mathematics at Woodbury. Now all of our students have access to that higher level course.
Mhm.
At the high school level, there have been some classes that have merged. Our goal is really to make sure that all students are accessing that honors level curriculum. I know I was talking with members of my superintendent student advisory curriculum a couple of weeks. Sorry, superintendent student advisory council a couple of weeks ago. They're made up primarily of high school students, um, and they were talking about their experience going back in elementary school, and in older grade levels. They remembered either seeing students being pulled out for enrichment,
Mhm.
or they were pulled out for enrichment. And those who were pulled out talked very specifically about uh, some of the experiences that they had that were robust, that were engaging, where they, were really delving into kind of deep questions.
Mhm.
And what they said is they believe that every student should have access to those kinds of rigorous and robust learning experiences. And that is our goal. Now, I know that this is an area that we can still work on.
Mhm.
It's why I mentioned, for example, that the language arts is an area that we want to continue to renew our focus on, because that's an area where we want to make sure that we are keep pushing students ahead. What we've seen is that when we do have those high expectations, along with structures that support students in meeting those high expectations, students will rise to the occasion. Students will be successful.
Mhm.
Again, I know this is an area that we want to continue to
Yeah.
improve and strengthen, but I think it's something that we've seen some success already in, and we'll continue to work on.
Definitely. I have seen the successes as well. And I think it goes hand in hand with the teachers also being vulnerable and open to new strategies that they have not had to use prior to everybody being kind of mixed in a different way. So I think it's really also a hats off to our teachers and how they're pushing forward and addressing things differently. And it gives the students more self-esteem. It gives them a more sense of belonging because they're not always going back and forth for something that may be seen differently by their peers. And I think that's a big piece is that we need to lift up our students. And the way that we have started to do this detracking is really building the students back up.
One thing I want to highlight just before we go to the next question, and I know we're getting the sign here that we have to move on, but one thing I just want to highlight is that we have gone through a curriculum review process. So, for example, in math, we recently adopted a curriculum for both K for the elementary level and the secondary level through Algebra 1 that really makes sure that we're providing opportunities for students to be prepared for that higher level coursework and that has differentiation opportunities so all students can access the curriculum. That's a process that we intend to go through with our subject areas as well. So just something else I wanted to highlight. Um, so we'll stay kind of in the same vein for the next question. For students who test as gifted and need further challenges, how will the district address and support their needs? Great question. I didn't mention this earlier. I think that's both an area that we've seen some
Yeah.
successes in and highlights this year, and an area that we still need to work on. Just a little bit of context and background. We have done a much better job over the past couple of years of being more cohesive and comprehensive and consistent in terms of identifying students as gifted. When we started doing that, we also realized we needed to make sure we had structures and supports in place for students who are being identified as gifted in a range of cognitive areas. And so this year, for the first year, we have a gifted services coordinator for our district, as well as gifted intervention specialists. Now, like our other approaches, we really believe that we need to look at gifted services through the lens of the idea of excellence being inclusive, and that it's important for us to provide gifted services in the context of a classroom where all students can have access to those kinds of supports and services. Um, and it's an area that we're continuing to grow and expand in. I
Yes.
know I've seen our intervention specialists, our gifted intervention specialists in action. It's fantastic. I had the opportunity to visit, I think it was at Boulevard. I think it was a Boulevard. I can't remember which school, where I got to see one of our gifted intervention specialists uh, doing math Olympiad with students,
Yes.
and it was amazing. Students from, I think it was all fourth grade students, a wide range of fourth grade students, engaging in challenging, fun, inquiry based, conceptual problems, really having a fun
Yes.
time and really kind of pushing their thinking. That is our goal. And the data is showing that our students who are identifying as gifted are continuing to do very well. So I wanted to make that clear. I don't know if you
And
have
can
any
I add
experience with
on
that.
to that, that not only are we reaching all of our students by having that push and model with gifted learning, but our gifted coordinators and learning specialists are also looking through the lens of equity and how we identify our students to be gifted as well. Historically, many students of different cultures weren't always given that opportunity. And so our gifted coordinators and learning specialists are definitely digging deep into that type of work and making sure that everyone is being looked at in a more equitable way to be identified for gifted support. So I think it's a fantastic move our district has made.
Yeah, thank you. And just before we move on to the next topic, I do want to reiterate, I think this is an area that we've grown a lot
Yes.
in the past couple of years, and of course, still have work to do. The next question is: will Algebra One continue to be offered in the seventh grade? Sorry, will Algebra One continue to be offered in the seventh grade? So again, just a little bit of background. I know I mentioned just a few minutes ago that we have an Algebra for All model. All of our eighth grade students take Algebra One.
Mhm.
Um, I should have said then there is a relatively small exception to that. We do have some students who maybe are identified as gifted who qualify for acceleration. Typically, acceleration happens. It could happen in a specific subject area. Sometimes it may be less common occurrences. It can happen for a whole grade level. But acceleration is when we see students who are taking courses that are at least a grade level above, if not more than a grade level above. than where they're expected to be. We do currently offer Algebra 1 in seventh grade. We expect to continue to offer Algebra 1 in seventh grade. Similarly, we offer what we call 9 math honors. Some folks refer to it as geometry for some eighth grade students at the middle school. Relatively small number. There are some specific criteria we ask students to meet for students to take those accelerated course offerings. The next question, I think we're going to transition a little bit to a slightly different topic. How is technology impacting English and reading? Are they all reading, are all students reading the same books and having class-wide discussions where they are truly learning together?
Mm.
Do you want to
So,
tackle that first?
sure, yeah, I'll start off. So, what I have seen when I've been in classrooms, and that there's both. There has been classes where they have a read aloud where everyone is looking at the same type of literature, whether it's elementary to middle school or high school. And there's also differentiation of different types of books, whether it's through literature circles within the elementary, middle school, or high school as well. So students have the opportunity for choice. They also are getting differentiation. And there is some levels where they're coming together for a shared type of reading experience. It could also be an article, an excerpt from something as we get into the upper grades as well. But you are seeing both of these things that are happening as well. And technology is used through all the different reading programs that we have through technology. And there's also software that teachers are using that allows the readings to be differentiated as they're hearing it through technology. So we're able to have students have a choice in how they're going to receive the information. The technology allows students to do it outside of school as well with their Chromebooks here. And even within our media specialists, they also integrate technology in how they're doing their library media. So there's a lot of different ways that I've seen that.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what you said. Really, in an ideal world, and I think what we see a lot of is it's both of these kinds of models where students are reading a whole class text,
Mm.
and there are opportunities for them to either identify a book that they're reading just for themselves individually, or often in maybe smaller groups, kind of
Mhm.
literacy circles or
Yes.
maybe kind of book clubs, if you will.
Yes.
And ideally, those texts are really kind of targeted for students' needs. Sometimes we kind of talk about it like a Goldilocks
Right.
method,
Mhm.
right? Where it's pushing students. We've seen both. I will highlight just a couple things. I know our middle school this year did a whole school read. Um, the Rolling Warrior, I think, is the name of the book. And it was exciting to see students across grade levels, along with faculty and parents, engage in a whole school read. And I've seen students and classrooms where they're looking at maybe smaller group books. I know that at the high school level, students continue to read whole class
Mhm.
texts. Sometimes those are books, sometimes those are articles or other shorter selections, as well as um, more individualized or smaller group selections. Only other thing before we move on to the next topic, I did want to just highlight the work that we're doing in early literacy
Oh, yes.
is fantastic. Technology is a part of that. What technology allows us to do is really individualize supports for students, but we really don't rely only on technology. I know I've gotten to see our literacy specialists in classrooms. I was recently at Fernway where I got to go visit a lot of our our earlier grade levels, kindergarten and first grade, see literacy specialists and general classroom teachers working with students to build up those early literacy skills. A lot of that was happening in person with the teacher, and I also saw students accessing support and enrichment through technology, and that's the ideal setting where it's both of those things happening at once.
And we want to develop learners that become independent as well. So while we have all of these supports in place, it also allows students to be able to take this information and build on it when they come back to their seat or when they're at home or when they're away from their adult and get that independence with their literacy and continue to grow. That's the goal.
Yeah, definitely. So again, switching veins a little bit. Our next question is about our social and emotional supports. What social emotional supports are in place? What kind of an impact has this had on student well-being and behavior? Thank you for this question. I know last year at this time, this was a topic that was really top of mind and really front and center in our community conversations. Coming out of the pandemic, we saw that we had a lot of very intensive needs
Yes.
as it related to social and emotional and mental health and well-being. I wanted to start by thanking our community for being willing to invest so much in this area. We
Yeah.
really believe it is critical. We have invested in a great deal of additional staff this year, specifically to help support student social and emotional and mental health and well being. That includes a much larger number of social workers and other student care specialists. We have counselors now at the elementary level, which we didn't always used to have. We have additional student support professionals at the older grade levels, really from Woodbury on up, and it really has made a difference just in providing students with trusted adults that they can go to get additional support. Our Family and Community Engagement Office
Yes.
has done a great deal of work working with families to provide wraparound services so that students are getting the support that they need. And we've also put a lot of effort into the curriculum that we're implementing.
Right.
And I
That's
don't
what I
know
was
if
going
we
to
have.
actually add is that we have a curriculum to help support our social and emotional needs of our students as well. And all of the supports that you just mentioned, people need to know what's going into the classroom too. That it's not just a student having to see somebody outside and to fill out a paper and the family to do that. That's in place as well. However, I have seen our counselors, our social workers actually go in and do whole group lessons with everyone, and it's something that we all could use. And especially when you have a child that might need something that's a little bit more extra in that area, they're not being singled out because the entire class is receiving that support. And I've seen this especially in the elementary classrooms. It really has been a delight to see the classroom teacher, the social worker, the counselor to all come working together. And the students look forward to them when they come in. They're also working with them and eating lunch with them, having lunch groups and lunch circles. So it truly is a continuous effort. Whereas in the past, probably pre-pandemic, a lot of it was just pull out for individuals. And now we're really seeing that integration of learning in our buildings.
Just a couple things I want to highlight. I'll start with Woodbury. Our fifth and sixth grade building this year really started off the year and has really put a big focus on social and emotional support and well-being for our students. They adopted a theme for the school called Ubuntu,
Yes.
which is the idea that we are all successful as a community and that we all need to rely on each other and support each other. I know I've been at Woodbury a number of times this year and getting to see that in action, and students and staff and faculty and families really living that theme out. We've also supported that kind of work with advisory or homeroom
Yes.
programming where students really get to build those positive relationships with each other and with adults. The other thing I want to highlight is we've been much more intentional this year around implementing what we call positive behavior interventions and supports. Sometimes that acronym is called PBIS. Really from pre-K all the way through 12th grade. This is an area we still need to grow in, but also that we're doing a lot of work in. I know I was recently having lunch with some Mercer students, and they were talking to me throughout lunch about how excited they are about the PBIS structures that are in place. I think they were having a PBIS assembly that day.
Yes.
I know Lomond has done a lot of
Mhm.
work around that same kind of community building.
Yeah.
We're seeing similar efforts at older grade levels as well. So this is a really exciting area.
Right. And we're also trying to shift that PBIS is more than just the rewards piece, is what we used to see a long time ago. But there's so much more to the positive behavior supports. And that's something our district is really starting to bring in now and highlight.
Yeah.
They've always been there, but now we're putting more highlighting on that so that we have these structures in place prior to when we get to that point where we need to address a certain issue. So that's good to see.
Yeah, it is really good to see. I know the question asks, is it making a difference? It really is. We've
Absolutely.
seen really an improvement. I know I mentioned this in the slide presentation, reduction in discipline incidents, which is fantastic. And also generally just a more positive school culture and climate. That's something that we're also going to keep measuring through tools like our panorama survey that help us provide or help collect data around that. Um, I know we are getting closer to 7, but we still have some time for questions. It looks like we have maybe 2 more questions um, before we wrap up. So the next question I am positive is one that you can start with. The question has to do with South Africa, which you mentioned earlier. What is the current state of equity in South Africa? What makes it unique from US cities where cultural diversity is also present?
Wow. That's a lot right there. Let's see, do we have enough time? So really the current state of equity in South Africa, it's more than a notion. In Africa, where specifically where we were, apartheid just officially ended in 1994. So when we're looking at equity there, it's through a lens that has had a lot of oppression, even more recent. We have oppression here in the United States still, unfortunately, but what they are dealing with, it's a lot more recent in how they're addressing it in the aftermath of that. When we were in the South African schools, whether it was the IB school or local South African districts, what we saw is that people were doing what they needed to do to support their students. We talk about these wraparound services. For them, that's just how they do things. It isn't even called a wraparound. It's called school. It's called family. It's Ubuntu. It's what they do. And it's interesting that we have these categories here, but there is just a way of doing things. And that's something that we can learn from the South African school system. They still have things that they're working with too. Nothing is perfect. However, something that is unique about their culture and in their school system is that they're embedding the South African history throughout their curriculum. It's not an add-on, and that's what we want to get to our goal here is that the history of our marginalized cultures is embedded in whatever we are doing.
When I read this question, I think maybe one of the things that is being asked as part of this question is, why do we need to go to South Africa when we can also experience or learn about some of the things that we face as challenges or that are present in our country in places that maybe are closer, right? And so, like the civil rights movement in the South
Mm.
and across our country, we can learn from and we do learn from. I know I had the opportunity to go to South Africa a few years ago, had a very similar experience as you did, just in terms of the parallels that exist between the work that's happening in South Africa and the work that we're doing here in Shaker Heights. I would also highlight two other things. We have placed a real value in Shaker Heights on our students having international study abroad experiences, like
And
our
here we
band
go.
going to
Yeah.
Paris.
Mhm.
We've never had an international abroad experience in sub-Saharan Africa. I think there are very few districts that have. I think it's critical as we think about our curriculum and our overall experience becoming more inclusive,
Mhm.
that we think about how we can include um, that story, that narrative, that part of our world in our
Yeah.
curriculum. Also, we're an IB district, and I know you went and visited an IB school in
Yes.
South Africa, so we have a lot to learn from that respect as well. It is not to say, and I know that we have experiences for our students to go closer to home, whether that's Detroit or other cities
Right.
nearby.
Right.
Those Washington D.C., those opportunities will continue to happen, and I think that the opportunity for students and faculty to engage in partnership and collaboration with students and other teachers and educators in South
Yes.
Africa really presents a pretty amazing opportunity.
It's not only an amazing opportunity, it's a life-changing opportunity. It was a life-changing opportunity for me as a Black woman, as an educator, as a parent. You're looking and seeing what they're doing in their culture that we could also learn from, but what we could also be proud of. When I see where my people have come from, we look at our district and we have a large amount of students of color that are from marginalized countries, their ancestral roots. And we also need to bring that into our curriculum. We bring the curriculum from many other areas where people's roots come from. I asked somebody else, why not Africa? Why not? There, there are so many things we can learn from their curriculum, but their culture, how they're treating each other, despite all the oppression that they have experienced, they are still showing that Ubuntu spirit in what they are doing. And we can learn from that.
That is great. I know we've already gotten quite a bit of interest
Mhm.
in the idea of a student abroad experience
Yes.
and possibly opportunities for faculty and staff to learn from and partner with South African educators. So we're excited to see this continue to roll out over the next year.
Yes, a lot of people say, "When can I go? When are you going next?" And like, come on now. There's so much that we can learn. I'm excited to bring other people into this experience. So it's wonderful.
So I think our last question, what is being done to diversify our faculty and staff? And we are doing quite a bit. I'm really excited. I know we spent a whole board meeting talking about a lot of the efforts
Yes.
that are underway. And I would say that there are, and I know you've been intimately involved in these efforts. Um, First of all, we're doing a better job of just monitoring our staff diversity data and
Yes.
just getting a better idea of what our staff composition looks like, both from a whether that's a racial perspective or other demographic factors. So that's a important starting point. We are also being much more intentional about our hiring, recruitment, and retention process. For folks who are interested in exploring much more about this, I would encourage you to look at our January board meeting. I think it's our board work session, the first week in January. Um, this week, in fact, we are kicking off, or this week starting, but over the next couple of weeks, we are starting efforts to ensure that all of our hiring committees are going through training related to best practices as it relates to human resources and also implicit bias.
Yeah.
Um, and we're also being much more intentional about our recruiting efforts, partnering with institutions across the region to diversify our faculty and staff, looking at ways that we can support uh, growing our own. You know, we
Yes.
have faculty and staff that are ready to move to the next level. Those are just, and then making sure that we're getting feedback from our staff and faculty, particularly staff and faculty that maybe may be underrepresented, learning about their experiences. What can we do to make sure that they feel supported, that they are building positive relationships with each other and with other members? Getting that feedback is critical, and we've been much more intentional about that.
Yes, and having those relationships is what made that possible. So I think as we continue to build those relationships, we can continue to retain our Black faculty and staff. Something that has really made a big difference as well is that there has been an intentional push to have representation of our Black Teachers Task Force here in Shaker at the table when we're going through applications and when we're interviewing candidates from the beginning all the way through their last phase of the interview process. Prior to that, there were many different people involved, but there wasn't an intentional effort to have a representative there. And by doing that, we're trying to make sure that all voices are heard in the discussion about the people we see on paper and when we see them in person. But we're also trying to be inclusive of the people that we have coming to the table, that it isn't just administration, it's not just teachers, that there's a mix and that we can have those conversations. We've had a lot of people of color in administrative positions hired just in the past couple of years. We've had several people of color that have been hired in the classrooms just the past couple of years. Although we've had some throughout my experience here, the past couple of years, we have really had a huge impact with people of color being hired. And I think a large piece of that is who is at the table. And I feel the great collaboration that we have with human resources, with different departments, teaching and learning, having those relationships across the departments is what made it possible for us to get these types of candidates here. So I think it's a lot of things that help that.
I would agree. Just a couple of quick things I would highlight. First of all, I want to emphasize the long-term nature of this work. We're very fortunate in Shaker that when people come to work here, they often stay and work here, which is fantastic. People make a real home out of this community. So this is a long-term endeavor because we know that over time our staff will continue to diversify, and we want to make sure we're putting in place short-term, medium-term, and long-term efforts to make sure that we're continuing to keep this as a focus. I know I had the opportunity to recently meet with all of our new staff, and I want to highlight those folks who helped to organize our new staff orientation experience, onboarding experiences, which don't just happen right when new staff get here. It happens really over the course of the entire year. The new staff and faculty spoke about how positive, how welcoming, how supportive Shaker Heights is, and our teaching community. And those are efforts that we want to keep making sure we focus and make sure teachers, for example, have mentors when they come to our district. Also, I want to be clear when we talk about the diversification of our staff and faculty. Having more staff of color, more faculty of color, especially, is a key part of that. And we know that it's not the only part of it. So, for example, having staff, LGBTQ plus staff
That's
is
right.
another area that we want to make sure we highlight, and staff with other kinds of backgrounds and experiences. So that is also part of it. Um, it's really making sure that we're looking at this as a whole. And just like in our curriculum, we want our students to see themselves
That's right.
and see and learn from others through our staff and faculty.
And
So
that boosts learning.
it
I'm
does.
sorry
It's
to
good
cut
for
you off
everybody.
there.
No,
I get
totally.
excited
So
when I think
it's
about
true.
this.
Yeah.
But when they see each other, they see someone that looks like them, sounds like them, comes from a background similar to theirs or their family, it makes them be more engaged with the material.
Yeah.
And that boosts learning.
Mhm.
So, like again, like I said in the beginning, it starts with us and the decisions we make. You know, whether it's orientation, whether it's of color, if they see people that they can connect to, they're more engaged into the lesson, and then it's going to boost what they're doing in the
Yeah.
classroom.
And that's good for all students.
It's
We
good
know
for
that.
all of us.
I know we're getting the sign, Dr. Patterson, that it's time to wrap up. I really wanted to thank you for
Thank
engaging in
you.
this discussion this
Thank
evening.
you.
I wanted to thank all of the folks who tuned in to view this discussion and this presentation. We will share this recording with our community in the very near future. And as always, for folks who have additional questions or input or feedback that you want to share, please do not hesitate to do so. We are excited by the work that we are doing in Shaker Heights and looking forward to continuing to strengthen it. Thank you, everybody, for joining this evening.